You're listening to Footscray Live.
Welcome everyone, broadcasting live from Whitten Oval, you're listening to the Performing Arts Show on Footscray Live. I'm Gronya and here with me today is special guest Devon Taylor, Director of the Women Circus. On my panel I have Taylor, Marley and Carter. Devon, could you tell us a little about the Women Circus?
Well, hello everyone. Great to be here.
Hello.
I'm happy to talk about Women's Circus with you all today. Women's Circus, we're based in West Footscray. I can see it from the Whitten Oval. It's a big red building just behind us there. We've been in there since 2006. But the Women's Circus started in 1991, so it's coming up to almost 30 years now.
Wow.
And we provide opportunities for women, trans, and non-binary people in the community to learn about circus and performance, take classes, perform with us, come along and volunteer on our community programs that we do, and generally have a pretty good time along the way.
Hi, it's Marley here. I was just wondering what the scariest part is about performing in the circus.
Well, I think it's probably pretty individual. What I've sort of seen is probably the scariest part is actually being vulnerable in the process of making a work. I don't know if anyone's been involved in a show. Sometimes you get a bit scared what people might think about you, or you're not going to do it the right way, or you're halfway through making a work that's never been made before, and you're like, I don't know what we're making. What are we making? Are we really going to make something that's going to be something that people want to come and see? So I think, taking risk is probably the scariest part, physically and creatively and sort of socially. But I think we do it in a way that supports people to take risks.
So this is Carter here.
Hello, Carter.
What's your role in the circus?
I am officially the executive director. So that means I get to sort of make sure that everything's safe and all the programs are running the way that we want them to. And I set up partnerships and kind of talk to community members. And I also look after sort of the financial side of the organization and kind of connecting our membership with all of the programs that we offer. Yeah.
Now, Devon, that's clearly a huge job. So how did you even get started in working here for the Women's Circus?
Well, long journey is that I've been making performance work for a long time. I studied in theatre and performing and went on to make a lot of my own work. So I had context for sort of producing and making work, and a lot of it was a community engaged way. So I would often work with non-professionals to make the work that I make. So there was that skill. But I started with Women's Circus because I sort of was living regionally and came back to Melbourne and felt like I needed to connect in with some sort of local performing arts people, and they were looking for a production manager on a show. So I put my hand up and I got the job, and then from there the position for executive director came up, and someone encouraged me to apply, and they already knew me, so sort of went from there, and that was about 6 years ago.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great place to work.
Going back to your answer to Carter's question, if people, you mentioned that the place, the Women's Circus runs lessons, are they free to join or?
No, most of them cost money. There's a sliding scale, and we have sort of supported spots for people where money is an issue. But in order to perform, so to access the performance side of things, you need to be training in circus. So that side of it tends to be one where you pay for that. But once you're doing that and you're a member, then you can participate in any of our creative projects for free.
Yeah.
We run a lot of community programs. So we might work in partnership with a school or a health provider, and they might have a group of, students or women in their services, and those ones are free. So if we're working with a particular cohort, like, women who have all just recently escaped family violence and they're connected in with, some sort of local health service, they'll come to us and do circus as part of like a recovery program or something like that. That's all free.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we can support some of those women to come into our training program for free. So that's the pathway, I guess. Good question, though.
This is Taylor, and now that you mentioned sort of those support groups, what impact has the Women's Circus made on people who may not be in the best position?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think again, it's a pretty individual journey for people. But what we know is that a lot of people feel more connected to their community because they find like a crew.
Yeah.
You come in and you're training with these people, and it's not just. I mean, our goal is not for you to be the biggest and strongest. Circus artist is for you to be the biggest and strongest famous person.
Yeah.
So that might mean that you still struggle with getting yourself up on the trapeze, but you're surrounded by people who are encouraging you to do that. So that, I think people will definitely tap into the creativity in a way that they maybe you don't have permission to do on a daily basis or don't have time to do, which I think are synonymous in some ways. And also I think things around sort of like recognition, that sense of place and purpose and recognized by your community as having value also happens for a lot of people. That's the impression. Lots of self-confidence and self-esteem stuff too. And I think, one of the things that happens for us is that we tend to invest with the people who are connected with us. So a lot of the people who start as maybe just a training class participant end up, we recognize their potential, I guess, and we encourage them. And next thing you know, they're teaching one of our classes or are a lead artist on one of our programs. So that's not for everyone. Not everyone's going to become a circus trainer, and not everyone wants to be paid to do that. But there is that scope as well. A lot of our trainers started out as just sort of training members.
Yeah, I think that's really incredible. That's so cool.
It's really great because I think it's the culture of where we work is really key. Like it's really inclusive. It's a feminist space, all that kind of stuff. So having people who have that sort of peer model where people have a lived experience of experiencing the benefits of the culture, then they can really sort of embody our culture in a leadership space as well, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how can students get involved?
Well, there's a class for teens that runs on Mondays, and it's a great group. So that's open to women, trans, and non-binary young people. And so that's on Mondays from 4:30 till 6:30 or something like that, and they run in 10-week blocks. Best option, though, is all the things, right? Follow us on the socials, find us on Instagram, find us on Facebook. I don't think we're on TikTok or Snapchat, but maybe next year. And then the newsletter is probably a really great space to subscribe to the newsletter because that keeps you up to date with all the activities because we've got lots of programs that we offer. Yeah.
Grania here.
Yeah.
Do you have any really cool success stories from anyone who's trained at the circus or from you personally?
I guess it depends on what you mean by success. I guess, from a public recognition perspective, many of our participants, some of them have gone on to, get employment and at Circus Oz and sort of key ensemble members. But I think we don't define success just purely in that linear way. So I think people, a good great example is one of the women that we worked with in one of our community programs last year came through us because she was sort of affected by homelessness and was struggling with housing insecurity and LinkedIn. She was attending every fortnight, and then we've supported her to undertake, we have a 6-month program called New Crew as part of our training program, so she moved into that. And now we're going to reactivate the community program next year with the same partners, and she's going to return in an assistant trainer role. So that's sort of, I think that's a really, that sense of accomplishment for individuals is a really important part of it. So those are successes, I think, for me.
Amazing.
Now that you mentioned the community program, do you know when that started and how that sort of began?
Like the circus itself?
No, the community program in the circus. Or was it there from the start?
So I think it's kind of morphed, right? Like it started essentially as a community project. It was designed, it was sort of low cost, and it was specifically supporting women who were survivors of male or family violence or violence. Which tend to be male violence, but anyway. And so that call went out. They met every week and trained and then made a show together. And that was a really simple model, and now it's grown. Now we have, many classes. The community outreach, though, is really important to us because we acknowledge that not everyone has the same pathways or access to things, and there's reasons why people can't participate. So having opportunities for women who maybe wouldn't come through directly to our training program is really important. And it's been around in some way or another since we started. I think, it's what I've observed is a lot of the people who come and train with us what we know is that they talk about wanting other people in the community to have the same benefit. So that's why a lot of them end up volunteering on our programs and things like that, because they're like, well, I can access this and I want other people to be able to access this too. So and we do a lot of we do some international partnerships sometimes, and that I think a couple of years ago we had we worked with Circus Kathmandu, and they're a circus in Nepal made up of circus artists who had all been sold into circuses as young children. So that's a whole thing in that area of the world. And so they had either escaped or been sort of freed from that slavery when they were in their sort of teens, but they had these skills, so they decided to start the first contemporary circus in Nepal and try and sort of shift the stigma around all of that and tell their story and shift, human slavery stuff going on. And so we worked with them around building their skills in social circus. So social circus is that sort of model of community practice. And then we learned a lot from them, obviously, working. They had a high level of circus skills, and it was great intercultural kind of stuff going on. So that's the kind of stuff we work with.
Are there any men on the creative team, or is it a safe space for women? Is that the idea?
I can definitely say there's no cis men usually involved, unless it's really specialized. But we really strive to work specifically and provide employment to women, trans, and non-binary people. Safe space is a funny one, isn't it? We don't tend to use that language anymore because we don't create the safe space.
Yeah.
We don't get to determine what's safe. What we can do is set up systems to ensure that people feel empowered.
Yeah, but it's up to them.
It's not up to them to but I guess safety is a relative experience. So we just try to make it a space where people have permission. Yeah. So, and that's and really know that they can talk and speak up, and that there's opportunities for reflection. And Good question.
What's the scariest part about performing in the circus?
Oh wait, we've done that question. But
Really?
I can answer it again. I talked about being vulnerable. I think your friend Molly. It's also, look, there's a lot of risk, actual physical risk involved, right? So we've got a safety officer on all our shows. We've got trained riggers. So riggers are the people that get up and do all the ropes and make sure that the aerialists don't fall on their heads. So we've got lots of rigorous sort of safety mechanisms in place to support things. But because I think definitely falling from a height is pretty scary as well. Lock on wood, it hasn't happened for us for a long time. Yes.
Now that you mentioned the physical safety of things, what are some of the stunts that are performed? What are some of the acts that are performed at the Women's Circus?
Well, I guess it starts in the training space. You can train. General circus tends to be a lot of acro. So acro balance is where people climb on each other and balance on each other. That's sort of a foundation piece. And then you can move into doing doubles trapeze, singles trapeze, lots of tissue, which is all this sort of and rope-based stuff. So lots of aerial stuff. We've got German wheels, which are the ones where people are sort of in a big wheel and roll around. Lots of juggling and manipulation, stuff like that. Hula hooping. Those are sort of the stilt walking, pole work. So the last show, I'm trying to think of all the different acts that we had. Anything can pretty much turn into a circus apparatus. It's pretty fun.
So you also perform shows at the Women's Circus, right?
Yes.
So what would you say has your favorite show been out of all the shows you've worked on?
Well, I've worked on. It's tricky. I think this last show we did, which was called The Drill, was logistically challenging for our organization in a good way. So it really pushed us to kind of try some new creative ideas, which I think was really fantastic. But I think my favorite work was the one we did for our 25th anniversary, which was because it was this really strong ensemble. So it meant that everyone was on stage the whole time together, and it really built that sense of community. And it told the story of the Odyssey, which was written by Homer, right? Yeah. I'm sure you've probably all studied it recently. I hope you're all studying it at least. It was the retelling of that myth through the female characters prominently it was around the kind of shedding light on the issue of violence that was in that, because basically Odysseus comes home from being away for 15 years and decides that all the women have been plotting against him, and he slaughters them all. But that's not really the story we're told in the Odyssey, right? It's sort of an aside almost that they all get hanged. And so that was and it was nice sort of revisiting some of the themes that were pertinent to the inception of the organization that are still relevant today as well. So, yeah.
A lot of traditional circuses are very much the same. So what would you say sets your circus apart and makes it really different from traditional circuses?
Well, we definitely tell stories. So it's a circus theater experience that a lot of people come in. So it's not necessarily all this sort of act-based stuff with a host, and it's not all about wow and spectacle, although there's definitely spectacle. I mean, obviously, I think the sheer fact that you might have 40 women or members on stage is pretty remarkable, and you don't see that very often. And I think it's really an open access environment. So you can have never performed and never really done much, circus or anything, except for the 6 months of training you've done with us, and you're still included and essential to that experience. So we cater for a large range of skills and experience in our shows, which I think makes it a really exciting. And then I think the other point of difference for us is our is the intergenerational thing. We've got people. This last show we had someone who was just 18, who maybe even goes to your school. I can't remember. And then we had someone who was in her early 70s. So we've got a breadth of ages as well, which is
That's
really
incredible.
remarkable. You don't really see people of a huge age range on stage doing really dynamic things with their bodies very often. And I think it's definitely the thing that, having just done this last show, a lot of people commented on for me, which reaffirmed that for me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, that brings our show to an end. Thank you so much for joining us,
Oh, it's
Devon.
been fantastic.
Thank
That
you.
was
for having
Devon
us.
Taylor, Executive Director of the Women's Circus. My name is Gronya, and I'd like to thank my panel, Taylor, Marley and Carter, for joining us. This has been the Performing Arts Show on Footscray Live.
You're listening to Footscray Live.